Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Piero Scaruffi. This program is sponsored by the Stanford Deans of Engineering, Humanities and Sciences, and Medicine, by Chemical Engineering, and by Continuing Studies. LASER stands for Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous. It's been going on since 2008. Over the years, we've had more than 400 speakers, usually in person on campus. And there are laser series now in more than 50 universities worldwide. Go to leonardo.info if you want to know about lasers in other locations. Go to lasertalks.com if you want to know more about the series that I personally chair. And at lasertalks.com, you can find the full bios of our speakers and links to their website. We have 4 independent presentations today. And so I will introduce each speaker separately, actually. You can see on the screen where the speakers, and you probably already know if you are logging in. Patricia Blessing teaches at Stanford in the Department of Art and Art History. She specializes in the art architecture of the Islamic world. And she's the author of several papers and books, Rebuilding Anatolia After the Mongol Conquest, Architecture and Material Politics in the 15th Century Ottoman Empire, and so on. She's one of the top experts in the field. And again, if you go to lasertalks.com, you will find an extensive bio and a link to our website. Okay, if you don't need me, all yours, and I kill my video to give you maximum bandwidth.
Thank you, Piero, for the introduction and also for the invitation to speak here today. Today, I will present some material from my current work on water and Islamic architecture, and more specifically from my book project with the working title Arches Like Rainbows and Floating Palaces, Ottoman Water Architectures. This project is very much work in progress, and you will see some of the themes that I will be exploring as I continue my research. The stakes of the project are twofold, in that it engages in the study of multisensory perception of interior spaces, and through the presence of water in different types of pre-modern buildings, proposes an eco-critical approach to these spaces. Focusing on Ottoman architecture from the 15th and 16th centuries across Anatolia, the Balkans, Istanbul, and what's not on the map here, also Jerusalem and Cairo, the project analyzes how buildings were designed in relationship to nature and climate, with an emphasis on water. Water features such as fountains and basins, both indoors and in liminal courtyard spaces, supplied by aqueducts, cisterns, and open domes, were deployed to create a complex connection between the built and natural environments. In the project, I will integrate the study of architecture, poetry, and inscriptions, and approaches in eco-critical art history to provide new insights into these relationships. As I will show, water features within monuments are integral parts of the building's interiors and affect multisensory perception of these spaces. These water features thus constitute eco-architecture in that they serve to preserve water and regulate temperature for human use, allowing for an exploration of the relationship between architecture and climate. As I'm working on this book, I have found myself with the question of ties between interior and exterior, and between environment and built spaces. With water's pervasive presence in Islamic architecture, it is an ideal conduit to examine architecture and environment, eco-architecture, what is interior, what is exterior, such as courtyards that could be conceived of as both, for instance. As I examine these questions, I've been working my way through eco-art histories and the relationship between architecture and climate. Such work is only beginning to emerge in Islamic art history, and so I have also been inspired, among others, by Shugata Rai's eco-critical approach to early modern South Asia, Umar Harmanshah's study of Hittite landscape monuments in Anatolia, and Andrew Patricia's conceptual frameworks on eco-critical art history. But why write a book specifically on water and Ottoman architecture? Has this topic not been fully explored and dealt with repeatedly? As a matter of fact, the answer is no, not in book-length form in a comprehensive way, although many specialized studies of specific aspects such as aqueducts, hammams, cisterns, the water systems of even individual cities, or the use of water in religious spaces exist. And so far, very little of this work has looked into eco-critical art history at all. For now, the book might look like this. And in the talk today, I will roughly follow the sequence of these chapters, moving from climate to infrastructure, springs and water use in medicine, to mosques and palaces. As we think about water and climate, it's also important to note that what we see in a landscape today may not necessarily be what was there in the medieval or early modern periods, and is certainly affected by climate change. In this photo of the central Anatolian plain between Konya and Ankara, taken in winter, you see, of course, a place affected by drought. Normally, there should be, and at this time of the year, this should be covered by several feet of snow, which then would, of course, also bring water. Similarly, when we see rivers, they've often been changed, for instance, by shoring up their banks or by the construction of dams that then create, of course, the lakes behind them. And so these landscapes, when we photograph them, as evocative as they are sometimes a bit misleading as to historical realities. Now, on to a few examples. First, let me turn to the Mosque Zavi of Mehmet I in Bursa, a building that I previously examined with a view on construction practices and style, but which also raises questions of water and climate, especially as it is in a region that does get quite a lot of snow in winter. The building was created in a period when, within the growing Ottoman Empire, there was a strong emphasis on multifunctional buildings that could house travelers, including Sufis, who played a crucial role in this period, as well as serve as mosques. In the side rooms of these buildings, for instance, fireplaces, such as the one you see at the right here, were installed to provide heating for lodgers in the winter. At the same time, as Veronica Poyer, who recently completed a dissertation about this building complex, argues, water features in balconies of the upper level of the two-story facade could have served as cooling devices through summer. Thus, a monument like this points to the importance of considering climatic conditions in assessing buildings. In a region like Western Anatolia, harsh winters and hot summers are to consider. Thus, the climate is, for instance, very different from that of the Arabian Peninsula in which Islam emerged, and the climate of which has sometimes led to assumptions about the importance of water in Islam being tied to the aridity of its birthplace. Now, some of that is true, but there's also quite a lot of commonplace assumptions happening in this regard. Sorry. In Istanbul, the capital of the Ottoman Empire since the late 15th century, we are faced with a city that is strongly marked by the presence of the sea, with the Sea of Marmara, the Bosphorus and the Golden Horn, both of which you see in the background of this photograph, and the Black Sea affecting its urban space. But this is also a city that has long faced challenges in receiving enough drinking water, issues that are exacerbated in a contemporary city of over 20 million inhabitants, but are present in pre-modern sources. And importantly, Istanbul does not have a major river, unlike many of the big cities such as Cairo or Paris, London, you name it. Thus, the Tezkiretül İbniye, one of 5 autobiographical texts about the 16th century Ottoman architect Sinan, contains a poem that notes, quote, "There was in Istanbul a scarcity of water. The Kırkçeşme reservoir was depleted, but again, streams were found in those regions. Orders were given for the construction of water conduits. Building arches like rainbows, we brought with them water to the city, and more than 300 fountains were built. End of quote. Here, the text is referring to the expansion of the extensive system of aqueducts, some new, some dating to the Byzantine period, that brought water into the city from its western and northern hinterlands. And the Kırkçeşme system is to the north here. Bursa, one of the first cities to come under Ottoman rule in the early 14th century, is full of thermal springs that have been used for baths and medical purposes since the Roman period. The specific location of Çekirge, the neighborhood in which several Ottoman building complexes are located, is also the site of natural hot springs with healing properties that are described in medical treatises. In the Ottoman period, the neighborhood was also known as Kaplıca, meaning hot spring. The provision of access to water, ritual for drinking, ritual ablutions, and personal hygiene was a central feature, as is generally in part of many endowments in the medieval and early modern Islamic world. And this is not an Ottoman bath, but one built in the 1930s, modeled on an Ottoman one. And the pool you see at the center with that yellowish, greenish water gives you a sense of the thermal water that comes out of the ground here, and is still being used. There's also Ottoman Ottoman period bath. Some of them built on Byzantine ones that are still being used in the city. But water also has a reputation for the healing effects of its sound, as it appears in the hospital that is part of the mosque complex of Ottoman Sultan Bayezid II, a late 15th century building located in Edirne. Here, the sound of the fountain at the center of a domed interior courtyard spreads across the building. The presence of the fountain in this medical institution points to the notion, current in medical texts of the period, that the sound of water had healing power. Water is here part of a holistic approach to human well-being, in which body and mind both can benefit from the use and presence of water. In hot springs, through the soundscape it creates, or through the artificial pools of hammams that have water heated on site. Water, more than just a practical solution to thirst and hygiene, is thus also imbued with powers that evoke a multisensory response, harnessed and increased through architecture. For the use of water in mosques, the first issue that emerges is that of ablution. With the duty of praying 5 times per day for Muslims comes the duty to perform ablutions, wudu in Arabic, beforehand to perform the prayer in a state of ritual purity. Thus, unlike baptism in the Christian context, which is usually a one-time ritual, ablutions are repeated multiple times daily. The legal rules as to the details of the ablutions vary over time, and workarounds exist for situations in which water is scarce or not available. A related practice is that of ghusl, full-body washing, which is performed on the deceased before burial, but can also be necessary for the living after events that are considered extensively polluting, such as sexual intercourse, menstruation, or childbirth. The water used for ablutions also needs to be clean and ideally should not come from a stagnant source, such as a pool. The hierarchy of best to worst water to be used for ablutions moves from rainwater to snow, considered particularly beneficent because they fall directly from heaven and then are thus seen as an extension of God's mercy, to seas, rivers, springs, and wells, water containing natural substances whose presence can't be helped, such as earth, clay, algae, or tree leaves. Water containing substances that can be helped, that don't need to be there, such as tea leaves, a few coffee grounds, a few drops of tamarind. And these are situations that are really considered not ideal in legal text, but still nevertheless are discussed. In the case of other pure but not purifying substances being present, it is also important that the water retains its watery quality and does not turn viscous. So if there's something's water that's this kind of too muddy or has too many algae in there, like if you ever had a backyard pool and didn't clean it enough, right? That kind of thing. That's what you don't want. Water that has been lapped out by most animals or been standing in the sun for too long should be avoided. Although with the animals, there is an exception for cats. If you have a cat, you get the idea. Any water that has changed in smell, taste, or color should also be discarded. So in these legal texts, water is not a static substance, but can take up many forms. And what's important for the use in architecture is the preference for non-stagnant water, which then in fountains and ablution devices, as the ones you see here, frequently translates into flowing courses of water. In the context of mosques, the duty of ablution translates into the construction of water features that allow worshippers to perform these ablutions. These can be located in courtyards, as you see on the right, or as in the Suleymaniye mosques shown on the left, alongside the outer walls of a mosque. It is important to point out also that these water features are reserved for men. The fact that the lower arms and the legs up to the knees need to be bared during ablution means that Muslim women are unable to perform ablutions in public. Historically, this issue was solved by the fact that the public prayer at the mosque, including the Friday noon prayer, is not mandatory for women who may pray in the privacy of their homes. In the present day, women's restrooms belonging to mosques often have a section reserved for ablution. The water taps at the Suleymaniye are among the water features described in detail in the collection of Sinan's autobiographies that I quoted before with regard to the aqueducts. Further, describing the fountain and the courtyard and the setting for ablution, so the taps here for ablution and then this courtyard fountain, the part of the same text states the importance and beauty as well as the technical prowess required to build these water conduits. And there's an entire underground system of water pipes that get the water to both this courtyard fountain and the water taps. In the building's endowment deed, as Guru Nejipolu notes, the fountain is compared to Kauthar, a river springing in paradise, a reference that is also frequent in other Ottoman texts. Further, Nejipolu quotes the French traveler Dufresne, who in 1573 describes this fountain as a square marble basin into which water dropped like rain from a dome. While the fountain was no longer working at the time Nejipolu wrote her seminal article on the Suleymaniye, published in 1985, the water it has been restored to its function in the meantime. While in 2016, when I first looked at it closely, the water was gushing out with extremely high pressure. More recently, probably as recently as 2023 or early 2024, the appearance of rain dropping has been restored, perhaps to the specifications of the well-known French travel account, which has also been translated into Turkish. Now, all of this now operates with modern pumps, not the original hydraulic system. Now, most of the fountains in mosques are outdoors, but some exceptions exist, such as the large inter-fountain that is located at the center of the prayer hall of the Ulu Jami, or Great Mosque in Bursa, first used in the 15th century. While the domes you see here are the result of reconstruction after the building partially collapsed in a major earthquake in 1855, a 17th century description suggests that the rebuilding largely conformed to what was in place before, namely the series of domes, as well as the wire netting over the central dome that you can see here on the right. Notably, this fountain, even though it is inside in the mosque, is used for ablutions. So that's something that's a bit unusual and that I'm still sort of wrapping my head around. Not described in Sinan's autobiography, but certainly worth of similar attention as the Süleymaniye, are the water devices at the Selimiye Mosque in Edirne, one of Sinan's late designs. Here, a shadirvan that also features taps for ablution is at the center of the courtyard. The water creates an evocative soundscape that is more audible at night than during the day because of big crowds of visitors, mostly school groups and domestic tourists. But where it gets really interesting is in the interior of the building, where we find a further water device that no longer works, a fountain placed under the so-called Muezzin Mahfili. Günkut Akın argues that the pool and fountain, and this is really quite small, as you can see here, perhaps at the scale vis-a-vis this middle schooler on the left. Akın argues that the pool was intended for drinking and otherwise suggests that the central location in the prayer hall was governed by symbolic, cosmological, rather than practical concern. Not considered in this reflection is the acoustic potential of such a fountain. Placed underneath a platform from which the call to prayer would be chanted just before the start of prayers, so after it had already been recited from the minarets and people would have largely come into the mosque. And from where the muezzin also recited responses to Imam's prayer in sort of a call and response function. There is the question of whether this could have affected the building's soundscape, and again, that's something I'm still trying to track, and it's harder to do because this fountain no longer works. It hasn't worked into a period where sound or video recording existed, so nobody knows basically what this sounds like. But TBD whether I can figure out the way of perhaps digitally modeling that, similar to some of the work that my colleague Bisera Pencheva did on the soundscape of Hagia Sophia, which she was able to digitally reconstruct to be able to then see how, for instance, Greek liturgical music would sound in that space. Now, on the final point in my project, the presence of water both indoors and outdoors is also central in Topkapi Palace, a site that is full of water features internally and surrounded by and with full views of the sea. This is also noted in a late 15th century poem by Cafer Çelebi, an Ottoman both bureaucrat and in the first place, but also poet, where he describes how the elevated location of the palace, looking out over the sea, is indeed one of its prominent features, and conveys also some of the meaning to this royal residence. Never mind all the modern construction you can see on the background of the photo, right? Most of this would have been green with very little settlement. This is looking from the Topkapi towards the Asian side of the Bosphorus. The site itself in this poem is presented in terms of its relationship to the sea, the watery landscape that encompassed it on three sides. In fact, there are no view outwards from the palace that do not include the sea in some way, be it the Sea of Marmara, the Bosphorus, or the Golden Horn. Within the palace and on its terraces, water also abounds. Indoors, water is present in the hammams built into the harem, a fountain in one of the sultan's private chambers, and a separate space in the harem designated for those who passed away in the harem and its infirmary. All these features required a complex engineering in order to bring water to the palace, store, and distribute it within. On one of the terraces that offer views to the outside, official water features are in dialogue with the sea, and this is the fountain you see here. The large basin with a central fountain was built in the mid-16th century and comes with a viewing platform that would have allowed the Sultan to sit and contemplate the fountain and basin, while also feeling the sea breeze across the terrace. Behind the platform, a fountain with channels resembling a shadrband feeds into the basin, providing additional cooling during hot months. Thus here, like in many examples across the project, water is present in both natural and human-engineered ways, and is harnessed for both aesthetic experience and practical purposes, such as regulating temperature. And I'll stop here. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually have a lot more questions than I expected to have, so I'll have to condensate. So first of all, as you probably know, I'm from Italy, so I'm very familiar with fountains and aqueducts, bathhouses from the Roman age. I have traveled in the Islamic world, and if I have to mention two things that impressed me, you'd be surprised. One was the water wheels of Hama in Syria. That's the ones I remember the most. And then wells. And I don't know if it's just because the Roman wells were lost or whatever, but in the Islamic world I saw more and more impressive ones. So first question, is it just me, or was there something unique about the Islamic world that, I guess maybe it's more an engineering question, an architectural question. I don't know if you have any opinions on this.
Yeah, I mean, there's extensive water engineering across the Islamic world. Some in the Mediterranean, some of this is based on Roman technology, right? So aqueducts, and sometimes, including in Istanbul, Roman aqueducts continue to be used and updated. The same is true for cisterns as well, where you have existing ones that are still functioning into the early modern period and are keep getting updated and augmented. And there's other water technologies as well, right? Such as underground, what's called qanat in Iran and Central Asia, which are underground channels that allow you to get water directly from the underground aquifer, so from groundwater, for instance. And so there's certainly a huge complexity, which in this engineering, which also has to do with the climate in many places, right? There are various regions where there's challenges in reaching water, in getting water, and it's important, especially also because we're talking about really big urban centers in the medieval and early modern period, cities that are far larger than any city in Europe. And you need to find water to grow produce, to feed people, and to sort of run these cities, have drinking water, have all the other things. So there's definitely a very, very close attention paid to it.
And my second question is from the aesthetic point of view. The fountains, definitely from your pictures, you reminded me the fountains are definitely more, there's an emphasis on the decorative aspect of the fountain that I probably don't see in the Roman and Byzantine fountains. Could that be due to the fact that the Quran has a description of paradise you know, this garden and rivers and so on?
I mean, there certainly is a connection, and you often also see inscriptions that are specific Quran passages talking about exactly these kind of things, either water in paradise or water as a main vehicle of creation that are inscribed on fountains. So it's a way of also showing that appreciation for water, right? And having elaborate fountains. And also the fountains are often part of royal endowments that are intended to provide all kinds of things for the public, but providing water is also a really important part of it. So you might have a mosque complex, and then it has also fountains where people can get water, and it might distribute food to low-income people at the same time, for instance.
I was also fascinated by the idea of reconstructing the sound of fountains. I never thought of that. That's a very interesting topic. But anyway, you have 2 questions in the chat. You want to read them yourself?
Oh, sure. If I can, sorry, I think I need, oh, there's the chat. I just need to find this again.
It's so tiny on my screen.
Oh, here. Sorry, I couldn't see it. Yeah. Okay. So what is the relationship between the Anatolian waterworks and the Generalife Gardens in Granada, Spain? That requires a book to answer, but long story short, the Alhambra also, both the Alhambra complex itself and the Generalife, which is a sort of an annex to the Alhambra, have extensive water infrastructure as well. They have aqueducts that bring water in from the Sierra Nevada, the highlands behind, basically near Granada. And so there's definitely technological overlap in these ways in which you aliment you get water from faraway springs to where you want to use them. And the second, how important was the soundscape of water features and aesthetic value? Yes. So there's definitely that, so that the sound of the water features is also mentioned in poetry. It's also, there's some inscriptions, for instance, from hammams that talk also about the sound of water, in addition to its visual properties and its healing properties. So it's very much appreciated.
Yeah, wonderful. This was very informative. Thank you. Thank you very much, Patricia. I know you also have to go. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.